It's from a poem by someone named P.B. Hunter, and I think one of the final lines of this poem, which is called Dark Pool, refers to a pitch black mirror of unknowing, and we liked that phrase and the poem as a whole, so we took the title from that. No, nothing to do with the show.
Somebody else asked.
So that's a great show.
Yeah, we had Marie do some vocals for us on a couple of tracks. We'd wanted to work with Marie for quite some time, so we were really excited about having her work with us. And we've been wanting to experiment with vocals with our music for a while now as well too. So Richard also did some vocals, and we have some samples that we've used as well. But Marie was a lot of fun to collaborate with.
We've just officially put out one track called Sever the Signal that has Marie's vocals on it, and we'll be debuting some more stuff over the next, I guess, couple weeks before it comes out.
Yeah, the album's released November 4th, so it's not actually out yet, officially.
We've never been kind of following a kind of pure line of techno, I guess, and so we just wanted to experiment with using vocals in our work.
I don't think that we're trying to stay true to anything in particular. I think it was just another audio and conceptual element that we wanted to include in our music. So I don't think it was with a specific idea in mind, like, well, we need to do something that has an industrial reference per se, or we don't need to kind of stick to any rules for techno. It was just an element, a way of creating another type of sound and another way to add a conceptual element to the album. I think that was the reason for the vocals that we've started to include.
Sure.
Oh,
yeah, that was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, that was Atonal very much wanted to have a collaborative performance, so we approached a couple of people and managed to connect with Justin, and he was a real pleasure to work with, and we were really happy with how that turned out. Well, there's a new record from this project called Ouroboros that I do with Aaron West, who is one of the original members of Orphx. That's just come out or will come out in a few days on Antzen.
In fact, Aaron, our original member, he also contributed some sounds to this album that we're putting out as well. So he contributed some kind of drone sequences that come into a couple of the tracks. So.
Eschaton? Yeah, we're working on new material for that. Yeah, and more shows. For the most part, I mean, I don't know if you can make a blanket statement about that, but I feel like there is. It seems like in North America that there's sort of a following of trends that have already happened over here. So in the last few years, there's been more openness in Toronto and other cities in North America to a kind of harder and darker form of techno and more influences from post-punk and EBM. And that's fairly recent, where I feel like that's been happening longer over in Europe and on a much greater scale, more parties and festivals. Certainly something like Atonal doesn't exist in North America. Do you have Mutech, for sure?
An excellent festival.
Yeah, and more things are happening in terms of parties and festivals, but on the whole, on a smaller scale than in Europe. No, I mean musically, there's obviously an influence there, and a lot of the acts and artists that we found influential were those from the late 70s and early 80s who were explicitly responding to punk and sort of taking things further or developing ideas that came out of punk. So like SBK, Throbbing Gristle, I mean, those were Clock DVA. Those were a lot of the bands that really influenced us to make music. So yeah, I can definitely see that connection.
Well, we've been using a lot of the modular gear lately, since I guess 2009. A lot of focus on creating sounds from modular synths. We also have a lot of other kind of vintage stuff, like in the SH101, Poly 6 that I like. You know, you have your favorites as well too.
Yeah, a lot of vintage gear, I guess, and also, we still tend to use kind of other techniques like location recordings that we then sample and contact microphones. And I feel in some way in recent years we're kind of getting back to those old techniques and tools that we used before, effects pedals, etc.
It's fun to keep experimenting with like how you're making sounds and always trying new things, and and that we're always shifting how we're making music.
That was great. Yeah, I mean we've been to Japan twice now, and both experiences were really, really good. Just very enthusiastic crowds and incredibly well organized parties in beautiful outdoor locations. So, yeah.
Great crowds. Yeah.
yeah, that's a country that I think we've both always wanted to visit. So it's been a pleasure to play there.
Actually, we've been quite lucky to play a number of really exciting festivals this year. It's been a really fun year for us with Mutech and Unsound, Atonal, and Forte and Labyrinth. So it's really been a really super fun year for shows.
Well, each show, I guess over the last 8 years or so, I mean, more and more of the shows have been improvised rather than following a predetermined plan. It's partially due to the gear. Say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we would have been using something like Cubase and having sort of a backing track that we would then play over or mix in different ways. And now with Ableton and the modular equipment, we're able to improvise each show. And more it's become less planned and more just made in the moment. And I think these shows that we're doing now are more improvisational than they've ever been. And that's actually where we started. So when we began in the early 90s, all our shows were improvised with much more primitive equipment and more of a harsh beatless sound. But we've gone back to that improvisational approach, and we really enjoy that. It makes it a lot more fun, and the sense of risk, I think people can feel that. And I think it's just a lot more fun to do. And
we've really enjoyed the last few shows we've done on this tour so far. It's been a ton of fun, and in part to the way that we're approaching the live performance, more improvisation and in the moment and kind of working with the crowd, and it's been a lot of fun.
And it's also cool to be able to use bits of the studio recordings, stretching back through all the work we've done over the 23 years. And, just able to take little bits and pieces, including a lot of material from the new album, and then just putting that into the mix as we play. So kind of reinterpreting things that way. I don't think we'll be in costume, but we're hoping to see some costumes.
Just excited about the new record, and
out on November 4th.